everybody, and welcome to today's video where we're going to talk a bit about lighting in V-Ray. And more notably, we're going to be talking about how to set up a studio rendering scene. Now, what is a studio rendering scene? I have downloaded a few images, something like this. This is basically what you would expect to have as a setup if you need to make a studio rendering. So basically you have the center, which is supposed to be where your object is going to be, or your model, depending on what you're going to be making the renderer, and then you have different types of lights lighting up so we get a nice end result. Here is another one. So this is the basic 3-point lighting setup, where you have a key light, you have a fill light, and a backlight, helping you get a really decent end result, which is what usually happens when you end up seeing all of those people on TV. This is, in most cases, this is how they get lit up. Here is another setup. As you can see, we have those three lights, the main light, the fill light. We have a whole open window on this side, so extra lighting. We have another one on the top. So all of these are different setups for the same thing, which is studio lighting for rendering. So let's continue and see how we can use this inside 3ds Max. So before we start with anything, we're gonna take a simple teapot and use it as our main object, which we're gonna be rendering. So something very simple as this. I'm gonna just give it a bit more segments, something like 12, so it's not so jaggedy. All right. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to make something like this, which is going to be the base and the background. This is fairly easy to make. All you have to do is get over here, create one rectangle in the front viewport, or the left one, depending on which one you're in, something like this. Now right click, convert to an editable spline. Delete the front one, leave the top one, and now select both of these vertices and just make sure that they are sitting on the z-axis, or they're on the 0. So select both of them and place them on the 0. Now what we want to do is select the one on the bottom and the one on the top, so these two, and now simply add a fillet. The fillet is going to round up those corners, so it encapsulates this results here. As you can see, it's a small fall off. All right, so once we have this, all we have to do is go into modifiers and slap on extrude modifier, give it some amount, so it has some width, put it in here like this. And basically you have your base for the rendering. So now I'm just going to put it shaded. On top of this, I'm going to put an edit poly. And now I'm going to just check and see if my normals are flipped, which they are. So flip them back and simply pull this to the side and pull this to this side. So here we go. The most simple way of making a rendering scene for your object. So now let's simply drop a camera in here. So one V-Ray camera, physical camera. Create it anywhere you want, and while it's still selected, press Ctrl C, and that is going to move the camera exactly where you are at with your perspective viewport, which is a very nice way to really move the camera around really quickly and position it where you need it. So I'm going to just quickly check my settings. I'm going to put it at 1000 by 1000 resolution. Make sure it's something like this. And for this, I'm actually gonna try and keep the target level with the camera. So I'm gonna copy the value for Y here, I'm gonna put it on the camera. So that way my target and my camera are both going, whoops, not the Y. All right, let's go ahead and copy the Z value and paste it here. So now it's looking straight forward at our object. So let's just position it like this. Okay, so more or less we have a camera, we have our object, we have a background. So just a quick check in my camera. I'm gonna decrease the F number to 6, put the white balance to neutral, turn off vignetting, and put my shutter speed to something like 50. All right, so this is a very nice start that we have here. So now that we have our scene, let's put some materials on it. Very simple, so nothing complex, just a regular material. I'm gonna put it so it's all white, non-reflective, and I'm gonna use one material for the pot. Let's make it, I don't know, let's make it black. All right, rotate it around. This is, you can rotate it or not depending on what you need. So I'm just using it so we can see it better from the side. All right, so once we have this, now it's time to get to the interesting part, which is the lighting setup. When you're talking about lighting, it's probably going to be impossible to explain everything in one video, because lighting on its own, it's, well, it's a whole science, because depending on what you're rendering, you're gonna need a different scenario for lighting that particular object. Here is an example. On this image, you can see all kinds of different scenarios for lighting a human model. So as you can see, we have different types of lighting effect with achieved with different types of lights. I'm gonna leave this link on the website. I've actually made a reference to this link on the Facebook page, but I'm gonna leave a link so you guys can go ahead and get this image, or get the reference to this image, and you can get it for yourselves. So here we're gonna try to, well, mimic some of these types of lighting and see what we can achieve in the end. So for now, let's try and get the image that we explained in the beginning. So this one, the 3-point lighting. But before we do that, we're gonna try and simply drop in one single light and see how it is going to, well, how it's going to work in our scene. So one light, move it to the side over here. All right. Put it upwards just a tiny bit, and now while we're here, let's render and see what comes up. Well, as soon as the render is finished, I can see that, well, choosing the black color without any reflection would be a bit of a bad choice. So let's just change it. We can either change the color to something like more bluish, or any color works, but it would be a good idea to give it a tiny bit of reflection as well, so we can see some highlights from the lighting. Also, another thing that I noticed is that my light is positioned a bit up front, which is giving me this line over here, which is clearly visible from where the light is emanating. In most cases, you don't want this to happen, but maybe you have a case in which you want to have that light appear from here, so you have a darker side on that one. In that case, you can leave the light like this, or on the contrary, you can just move it on to the back just a tiny bit more. So now, once you re-render, we can see the new render. And there is our initial render with just 1-point lighting. 1-point lighting is okay, and it can be used. I'm not saying it can be used. If you want to have a more, well, one-sided or one side lit up look like this. So that this is more used when you want to emphasize one side of the model and you want to have the colors kind of fade out on this side. It leaves a nice shadow on this side, but more or less it's a very rarely used way of lighting something. So for now, let's go and add a few more lights and try to position them in this 3-point lighting setup. So we're gonna put one key light, which, as you can see here, has some color, but we'll deal with the color as soon as we get to it. So now I'm gonna move this and I'm gonna rotate it about 35 degrees from the camera. So let me just put this on the side, put this here, and we're trying to copy or mimic this look. So this light is going to be our key light. We need one more coming from this side. So here I'm going to hold down Shift, copy this here, and rotate it for 90 degrees and put it in the scene. Make sure it's pointing directly into our object. And now here's a thing that you need to remember. The key light is always the light that shines the brightest. The fill light is there not to combat the first light, but simply to fill in the gaps. So if we're going to be using a multiplier of 30 for the main light, for this one we're going to use something like half, or even 10. We can use either 15 or 10. Let's go with 15 and we'll see what happens. And now we need just one more backlight, which is going to light up the top or the rim of our object. So one more time. Copy it over here, move it to about here. But this time around though, I'm gonna move this light upwards a bit till about here, and then I'm going to rotate it so it's shining down on the model. So I'm going to go on the local transform, put it down to 45 degrees, and now it's going to be shining on our object. All right, move just a tiny bit downwards, and now if I let the render go on like this, what I'm gonna see is a problem, because this light is going to be visible and I don't want to have this very huge pane looking here, or this plane being here. So I'm gonna make it invisible. So now let's see what we have so far in our scene. As soon as the render is finished, I get something like this. Now here's the interesting part. We can see these two planes over here, which kind of break the illusion that this is CGI. It's actually making us think and know that this is CGI, because we can see clearly these reflections. So now we can use this to our advantage. For example, if we take a look at one of the more commercial renders, like for example, let's take a look at this Axe body spray. As you can see, we have these two lines going from the top to the bottom, and we have these on the sides. Now these are actually the reflections, but in this case, since the lights are just small and the reflections are sharp, we get this well-defined looks. For example, if we go in and instead of the reflection having the glossiness of 1, let's go with 0.8. See how this thing is going to end up looking on our reflections. So let's just render this small region here. As we can see, right away we get that blurriness in the reflections. And if we want to have those long lines for the reflection, all we have to do is get in here and increase the size of the height or the width of the light. That is going to make the light higher, something like this. Again, make it, whoops, higher. But now since the lighting or the light emitters are bigger, that is going to shine in more light in our scene. So we should prepare for that as well. And now we can see that those lines are no longer visible like they were, but now we're getting more of this type of a result on our scene. All right, so once we did this, now we want to just, well, mention another thing, and that is the color variance in the lights. Usually, it's always a good idea, if you're going to be lighting your scene, not to light it with all white lights. What does it mean? Well, if you take a look at here, you're going to notice another thing. This light, or the key light, or the main light, has a bit of a reddish hue. So it's a warm light. While the fill light is more of a yellowish or cold light, and the backlight is usually, well, white or downwards to the yellow colors. So let's see how that chromatic aberration is going to look like once we have that in our scene. So like we said, the main light should have a more reddish hue. So in the color, let's give it a more of a reddish hue, something like this. Could be something more like, yeah. This one should be a more cooler light, so let's give it something like this, and this can stay around the yellowish colors, something like this, barely visible. So now, once we re-render, we're gonna see a bit of a different scenario happening in our scene. So let's see. And as soon as the render is finished, I can notice that it's barely visible due to the fact that our model here is, well, blue. So let's change it one more time. I'm just gonna go with white, white on white, and hopefully this is gonna give us a better result. And let's just emphasize those colors a bit more so we can see it more clearly. Give it a more colorish look here, so bigger hues. I'll close this. I just want to exaggerate this so you can see it right away. Render production, and there it is. Now that we kind of exaggerated the colors, you can see that switch going from the warmer colors towards the cooler colors, and that slow but steady flow from one to the other, and that transition is really clearly seen in about this area over here. Now for the last part here, this light, it doesn't always have to come from behind. It can be an over well, let's put it here like this. It can be an overhead light as well, so I can put it exactly on top of the model like this, and that is going to give us a bit of a stronger highlight on the top and more pronounced shadow on the bottom. So let's go ahead, see how that is going to look like. And as we can see here, now our render is more or less finished for our studio lighting, or one of the versions of the basic studio lighting. Now I'm going to stop this video over here, because in the next one I want to explain a bit more about different types of lighting and how you can mimic those lighting in this same exact scene. So for now, I hope you guys enjoy watching this video, and don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, as it really does help a lot, and I'll see you all in the next video.